signs going to remain out there by the sidewalks?
I'll be taking something to the EDC. It was actually going to be on tonight's agenda, and when David and I reviewed it, he said that the EDC had had some discussions, kind of in the same question that Ed just had, and so I'm going to be presenting to them in May, and depending on what the EDC says, you may see that at the May Planning Commission meeting. It may not actually get to you till the June Planning Commission meeting, but we are definitely working on the special event amendments.
Go by before the next meeting and look at those signs.
Yeah, they do look better.
Item number 6, training session on a letter of credit and discussion of an amendment to the Farragut subdivision regulations to clarify letter of credit cashing procedures.
Actually, you asked for a training session on this, and I think we lost Daryl somewhere. He's going to participate in this training session.
Yeah. Postpone.
But I will just go over what I put in your packet, and then we'll kind of go over into a little training session here with this. In your packet, I included all the applicable pages from the subdivision regulations that references surety requirements that we have. The first one that's included is on page 40 of the subdivision regulations, and this is regarding that completion and surety requirements for sidewalks and other pedestrian facilities. And this states that there is a 2-year maintenance letter of credit that has to be submitted to the town before a final plat can be recorded. And what this does is this letter of credit ensures that if there's some kind of failure in the first 2 years, that the developer has the option to go back and fix it, or we can cash the letter of credit and fix it. If you have a failure of anything within the first 2 years, they did something wrong during construction, is really what this boils down to. And the requirement for a 2-year maintenance letter of credit, 2-year maintenance of anything, the town has had that requirement for many years. This is not a new requirement that was established in the last few years or not. We have had it for a long time. We actually require this of all of our roads and that type of thing. And there have been instances where developers have had to go back and make repairs. There may have been bad soils that had not gotten, they really should have excavated more, or they had a certain amount of work done and then there was heavy rains and they didn't wait long enough for everything to dry out before they covered it up. So there's a variety of reasons why there can be failures. But the purpose of this, of course, is to protect the town so that tax money isn't being used to fix something that really was the responsibility of the developer. The second one is on page 44. This one we do not use very often, and part of the reason I'm going through all of these pages is because this is what we will be amending, just so that we are consistent with our terminology and so that you're kind of familiar with all these little piecemeal things. But this one is dealing with the common open space by a property owners organization. It says, in instances where developers chose to make significant recreational improvements to the required community open space or post a performance bond in accordance with Article 4, Section B of these regulations and has established a property owners association. We don't really act on this a lot except for the completion of walking trails because we accept maintenance and liability of walking trails. If somebody wants to do a swimming pool or a clubhouse or something like that, we actually do that separately through a site plan process because there is no mandatory requirement that they do that type of thing. That is something that they may choose to do for marketing purposes, but it isn't something that is required as part of our requirements, whereas the walking trail system kind of fits into other aspects of our requirements. So this is where we actually now more than anything have learned over the years that we require them to build the walking trails on the front end, and we don't even go with the performance bond. And this is actually something that will probably be taken out. The reason for that we require them to be constructed is that if I buy a house and you show me a plat that there's a walking trail, 99.9% of the people have no idea what they looked at and don't understand. If they walk out to the house and they see that walking trail, they know what's there. They know it's there. They know it's coming. It may stub to an vacant adjacent property, but they know it will connect to something at some point in time. So it's really kind of a, just makes people aware of what there is, that there isn't a buyer beware kind of situation. The next page is on page 60. And this is in Article 4.
Got a question?
On the, talking about not using a, authority on the, walking trails, you can put them up front, but we have, in recent past, approved delaying doing walking trails. Would you require a letter of credit at that time?
You mean like with Kroger development and things like that? If it's not near residence, and in that particular case where we ran into situation was that it currently was a horse farm, and it was kind of hard to put a walking trail in the middle of a horse farm. So there's always extenuating circumstances, and we wouldn't call it a performance bond, and we would put it in a separate section. The other example was with the along Kingston Pike there by Fox Den with that development. And that actually was through the site plan process. They posted you actually granted a variance and said, when the site plan is approved, then they will construct the walking trail. And again, it wasn't going to be next to someone's house. And that's really the biggest issue, is we don't want somebody to not be aware of that there's a walking trail that's going in next to the house that they are purchasing. Studies show that having the walking trail increases value and everything else, but people are creatures of habit. We're nervous of change. So even though studies and everything shows that having the walking trail raises your property values, it kind of is unnerving that you're facing change on something you think is not going to change, and so that's why we do it that way. The next one is on page 60, dealing with repairs. That, again, prior to the releasing the 2-year maintenance bond, we